Thank you very much, Mr. Ali. Great pleasure. Thanks a lot. And by the way, I'll have a chance, I think, to show myself. There is a picture in the second slide. Please bear with us. But first of all, assalamu alaikum, and very, very heartfelt welcome. Welcome to this webinar, and thank you for making it today. What an effort. We'll be sharing some thoughts, and we are going to also spend some time rethinking competencies. Since we've had a COVID pandemic, COVID crisis for short, we'll be talking about performance hunt across roles and across industries. So welcome to a very strange kind of times, to say the least. Still, from evil eyes to sacred hearts, a look at lucky charms around the world will tell us that amulets are meant to provide a shortcut to a better future. This is what I hope will, ward us off from evil spirits and bad forces. We are going to also talk about competencies and permanent changes post-COVID. So we'll discuss different research outcomes from schools such as the MIT, Sloan School of Management, sorry for that, the Harvard Business School, but other relevant sources. And I think it's a great opportunity for us all to really, really anchor some of our good thoughts for cleaner oceans, blue oceans, and thriving businesses, metaphors around us all around. Here it's me, sitting back at SB Jain School of Global Management in Dubai, UAE, very fun memories. And I'm truly grateful to you for following still what I'm doing in terms of strategic thinking, but also neuroscientific applications to business best practices. So I've had during my career the chance to be associated or working with or on board of given institutions or, houses of knowledge such as the IE Business School, which I'm sure you must be familiar nowadays given their endeavors in the Middle East. I've been associated with cultural projects such as the Trumpreneurs Hamden Turner with very important dwellings in different parts of the world, very global. I've talked to Olson Zalman as well, which is a company in the US that focuses on marketing. I'm sorry, this is my dog trying to tell me I need to take a walk with him. He had the leash on. Apologies for that. I've been very happy also to work with neuromarketing science and business association that is still thriving and doing a lot online. Perhaps you can take a moment to then check what are the latest books and publication, but also free videos that you can find on the internet. Happy to assist anytime. You can find my contact details on the LinkedIn profile, and I'll be happy to be in touch with you naturally. Last but not least, I've been joining the Stanford Business Graduate School on what they call the SEED program, and therefore we are helping a couple, if not 3 to 4 companies in Africa especially, and to some extent also in Asia, to develop whether it is the marketing plan or their strategic vision for the next, say, 5 to 10 years. And this is when, fortunately, the Global Performance Management Academy called me again through Mr. Ali to talk today. Now, I want to say that we are all startups right now, okay? Because we have been stampeded. And stampedes occur in nature very occasionally, when herds of animals just need to cross rivers and they're afraid of the crocodiles. But likewise, amongst humans, we have countless examples of herd behavior. This is where my neuroscientific behavioral approach comes in. So as researchers, we tend to study how organizations and obviously human people, human beings, wonder whether the current economic panic concerning the COVID-19 is not also leading to some very understandable herd behavior, and especially amongst leaders. whether it's political leaders, whether it's societal leaders, even maybe religious leaders, but most significantly for us today, I would say entrepreneurial leaders and servant leaders who are there to really do their best for society at large and contribute to the great wealth in terms of products and services. Anyway, I looked back at what has MIT done recently, because I think they're very good in terms of artificial intelligence and big data. That's probably one of their holistic facet. So they have surveyed, fortunately, some 450 global executives on how they expected COVID-19 to affect their organizations, both in the short as well as in the long term, and where they have been focusing their attention to, which I thought might be relevant to you people now in these circumstances. So I was also very curious to know what kind of actions they've been taking. And the research is relevant because it talks about the concerns being greater actually in the short term, so say within the next 6 months rather than the long term. Okay, that is quite true for about 15% across all the industries. So 15% is interested in the longer term versus what we have now. And I am not surprised in a way, because in fact the severity has hit the given industry most of us probably are involved in. It's a severity that has really brought to their knees many small organizations, especially those that didn't have large teams or larger backups, or were not traded, or were simply doing good to society, so the NGOs. In terms of industries, here are the top ones, and you can see that travel and tourism, as well as engineering or construction and healthcare, no wonder, have been hit the hardest. But that doesn't take away the other relevant ones, such as oil and gas and transportation, but also consulting and education. And even wholesale, which is somewhat surprising, has been hit pretty badly. Then MIT also looked at the size and types of companies that were affected to see the perceived impact. And the research has found that very large organizations feel less threatened by the crisis than the smaller ones, both in the short as well as in the long terms. And just 55 of the respondents commented that their companies with more than 50,000 employees reported that effects in the next 6 months would be very high. Okay, we understand, because they're large. Or extremely severe versus 70% of solo practitioners and 60% of those from organizations with 2 to 9 employees. Again, this is the first chiasm that we can observe. In addition, leaders from the private health companies feel less secure than those from publicly traded companies. One potential implication is that the larger publicly traded companies might be better positioned not just to weather the crisis, but also to pursue, guess what? Well, opportunities in the midst of a very strong storm. That is because the relative strengths and the weaknesses of the smaller competitors in the current context is comparable, and bigger players that have greater relative resources are better positions for acquisitions, okay, or other strategic investments, which is usually the concepts we use to talk about opportunities. But we'll see later in the presentation that may not be necessarily true, so giving some hope also to the small and medium enterprises. Anyway, in other words, it's a buyer's market. A significant minority also of respondents registered concerns about the damage to organizational culture, which is a very broad concept we would like to dwell on today, and existing core capabilities linked to the competencies. So they need to develop those, and they need to nurture the culture. More than a third of responses rated the need to develop new ones as a very high or severe concern. And this is a question of where the resources are going to come from, and what your human capital department is going to do about it. Also, we see that younger leaders are more afraid. Why is this the case? Well, because perhaps the top level executives are attuned to the bottom line better than the younger ones, or perhaps because they are less attuned to shifts in the market, which will require the new capabilities. Anyway, to sum it up for you, I think that we need to really focus on some of the following questions. What is likely to change permanently as a result of the crisis? And what existing trends in the crisis are likely to slow or accelerate over time? Do these sorts of changes create opportunities, or do they produce threats during the crisis, but also post the crisis? And can we capitalize on it if we rapidly and effectively pursue the right actions? Great. Just an underlining point here, the authors are both Michael Watkins, and Michael Yazigi from the IMD Business Schools here in Europe. So I think that collaboration will help us understand better where the links stand. And without taking a deep breath, I just want to continue on the same line of thinking and praise for a moment all of you, parents, adults. I just took maybe a shortcut here. So this is my dangling thread, and it's my line for fishing new thoughts. But I think parents are doing a terrific job nowadays. I know most of you might be locked down still or have been for a while. And here we are, deciding to stay together because technology eventually will save us. Another piece of food for thought, perhaps, for today. I am smiling, but I also fear, and I'm still in this kind of emotional state, unfortunately, because just 5 days ago, Wired Science posted the latest on the coronavirus. And the update was basically that we're not out of the doldrums. We are still fearing, a new pandemic or a new sprout of cases with some death toll. We are also not clear whether some of the medication is working properly and if the vaccine is going to be saving us all very soon from this strange kind of alienation. This brings me to then go to the idea of what kind of fake news or real news we're reading nowadays. Obviously, amongst us, there are people who are craving for, helping, and others who want to take advantage. Are we getting, questions? Shall I stop, Mr. Ali?
Professor, I would, in my humble opinion, I would request if we proceed with the presentation and we take the questions at the end.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much. Right. So here the idea is we've seen Mark Zuckerberg do great stuff. We also questioned him at points in time, whether for the elections or later on. But he looked like a guy who basically would care and would take sides for minorities at times. For example, he advocated the increased immigration to the United States. But then suddenly, society has also noticed that this gentleman, as Stephen Levy describes in his detailed new essential book on Facebook, this gentleman relinquishes much control of day-to-day and commercial operation of Facebook, and then wants to have a say in everything. So he did it imperfectly because his claim to support free expression has been notoriously and enthusiastically executed by censorious wishes of authoritarian governments around the world. Then Mr. Zuckerberg was also doing idealistic and naive accounts of human communication. And Zuckerberg seems to love power, therefore, more than he loves money or the potential to do good in the world. Therefore, what I'm trying to say is that a lot of our institutions are coming under attack, and it's very hard in the midst of this confusion to be clear about, okay, where shall I step? In the sense that, how do I make sense of what is my next move? Who should I trust? Who should I help? Because maybe there's just too much to be done right now, and we feel a little bit, in distress. Anyway, the plain view would be, for me at this stage, to just clear some of the space and say, we don't need that much talk on battles. Unfortunately, politicians, and let me pick on one who is very close to Spain, that is Mr. Emmanuel Macron in France. He opened his speech some time ago, just before the full pandemic was marching on us. But he opened his speech by saying we are at war, and he repeated about 5 times in very short period of words. 5 times he repeated it, and we had not just fully registered the battle images before then, but it was certainly there. Also in reporting from the Italian front line, and then talking about regions under assaults. Soon after that, basically 2 weeks later, US President Donald Trump also said that watching doctors and nurses was like watching, military heading to work and seeing them do their battle. So I kind of felt, amongst many other people, a little bit besieged and dehumanized. We felt probably like it was everywhere, and we started backing up in our household, backing up in our activities, fearing the worst, maybe piling up resources we thought would be very rare in a moment, and everything looked very gloomy. Now we know, of course, that we know through research that people have had a brush with death or extreme situation, then often become focused and less anxious, or even have fewer doubts about what matters afterwards. But if you ask those who have endured major losses, what really makes the difference is not so much the fact of being bombarded by words that scare you or bring you back to those terrible memories of being in a battle. Rather, it is that which makes you feel you are cared for, that you're good, in good hands. And by telling yourself you're good, then things obviously change to a better stage. You know that, I know that. Even if we should still be, I think, caring also about the fact not to go back to a normal as of yet, nor to just ignore the alarms and the signs of alert we should keep. There is a video that I'm not going to show because I didn't really have much time to edit it due to the latest news. So racism and some questions you could ask people to consider, not just in the US, I think, but throughout the world. There are a lot of points related to that, whether it's ancient colonialism and still best practices and approaches here and there. Just read this morning, unfortunately, of the death of 3 soldiers on the borders, Indian soldiers, by the way. So I think we are still needing a lot of the initiatives that we've seen so far and a lot of the caring. But I also think we have to take a little distance and look at life as usual, even if it's strange times. And that is why I'm sure you will identify and relate to the wish to help that little dog and to juggle, your activities so that you don't get caught. There is work and life balance which have completely changed. And there is obviously your personal care that is in great need of attention. So look after yourself first before you can help others. And this is why I have chosen also to talk about a book which to me brings all the questions into one. We need to investigate what is known, even if it is daring to investigate the unknown, by being skeptically innovative, by looking at our assumption and understanding why we arrived to a situation where we can't control nature, or we can't control a virus, or we can't control maybe where this virus has come from. And this book is called Change, written by a very funny psychotherapist called Václavich. This is back in another crisis during the 70s. What I love is that it says that solutions to our problems are inherently embedded in the problems themselves. Hence, we need to be very good at wanting to change, because otherwise we won't change. Even if these currents might be unexpected, illogical, and sudden, we need to move and to lead into very tangible fruition. One example he gives relates, I think, to the current situation, but is in our times, going back to 1334. It talks about the Duchess of Tyrol, a lady called Margareta, who encircled a castle in the province of Carinthia. The castle was Hochsterwitz, a difficult name, which I think helps you imagine this little fortress high up on a tremendous mountain with a valley very deep down and arduous hills to climb to get there. She still wanted it, so the best strategy she could think of was to take a siege. She didn't know how long it would take, nor did the defenders know. In due course, obviously, things became incredibly harsh. The defenders didn't have much food, and the army of the Duchess became unruly as well as nervous, and she felt herself pressured to go and attend other military problems elsewhere. Now, the commandant of the castle had a great idea. This is what Václavich thinks might be the best thing to do in difficult or dire moments like those. He thought of taking the very last ox and the few bags of barley left over before a famine took place, to slaughter that ox and to fill the abdominal cavity of the ox with the barley. He sewed them back and then threw the ox over onto the meadows just in front of the enemy's camp. At that stage, when the other soldiers who were trying to enter the castle found the animal and found all that bounty, they eventually decided to give up and left. In many ways, when we are so stuck, I think it's great to do exactly the opposite of what you would have expected. Financially speaking, this is the button that most companies might have had to do or will have to do in the very near future. This is also something that Dipanjan Chatterjee, who is Vice President and Principal Analyst at Forrester, suggests. Because this is not your first crisis. You've gone through the 2008, 2010, you've gone through the 2001, you've gone through maybe, if you're my age, the 70s crisis. But not being the first time doesn't mean, right, you have all the answers. So we still need to question and we still need to do a little bit of work, even if it might be a little bit easier this time around. We have examples. We have examples from Philip Morris introducing the Marlboro Man to promote a universally masculine appeal, or we have the example of Dr. Pepper, Thames, launch of a diet soda that was proudly not for women, and so on and so forth. Even the Old Spice's Male Like a Man, Man campaign. Well, we've had companies and brands that can no longer rely solely on outdated tropes to connect with increasingly diverse and empowered consumer. But I'm not just talking about the dual, views on gender, such as masculinity and femininity. We are seeing a kind of new chasm or divide thanks to this COVID-19. We're seeing winds of change that are at our doorsteps. For example, Ipsos, a study carried out in 2019, discusses the fact that all Americans, 34% of them, disagree with the statement that there are only two genders. And around the world, more than 35 countries, 40% of them disagree about the binary perspective, especially Generation Z, because they want to see something else, a transgender model or maybe a cisgender male and female model. I forgot to talk about Beanie. Beanie is the company here that actually was repurchased by Procter & Gamble. Yes, it all started with a small razor, but the difference between that razor was that it wasn't just showing female hair, it was showing something else, or at least it related to its consumer community by telling them, listen, we have designed our razor for womankind, and we've also taken away the pink tax so that you can have something that really matters to you. I think most companies have had to shed some of their employees, or are thinking of, or are trying to make, life easier for themselves. It may be true in many cases that that's the possible solution, but it may be also viable to rewire yourself so that you don't have just a black or white kind of solution, because our brains can't find that distraction. It's very hard for them, and I'm sorry if I'm jumping from one idea to the other, but pressured by time, I would like to take you to the nugget. I think our brains do have to fight the distraction. Often we are motivated inside by, I am bored, I am tired, I am not happy where I am, and this and that, which is fine because it's a driver at the same time of your ambition. Yet again, research shows over and over again that our brains should also take pause and should also look at those opportunities to rethink themselves, to rethink about how they are focused until now, and just look at the priorities. We're not powerless. We are in fact very good at focusing, even if we have to refresh every second about 4 times. So to do that, you always have to think, I have an escape, I have an exit, I have an in-out. And this is exactly why the in-out needs to be very much on the plate of the leaders. To be organizationally fit and to be facing this crisis, you have to bring back your leadership style at your best and really water your values deep down in your culture so that teams, people, processes, activities will all be nicely ointed in order to grow. Many values are going to be formed under the strains, and numerous employees will gain new perspective in their organization and for their leadership. Communication, therefore, will have to maintain the connection, will have to be key for the people to be actually motivated, because it comes from their guts, from their spirits, from their souls. It's not your first crisis, as I said, and no matter how well you've run a business, you leaders know extremely clearly that external forces will test you all the time, and that you also resolve. You'll find a way to resolve. So, if your employees are watching to see how confident you are, be confident and clearly see the situation when you are actually having the time and taking the time to do so. They look to you in terms of emotional fuel. So think about that. If you want to be the fuel of the engine, refuel yourselves as well. Go and check if everything is in order for your engine, for your tires, for your wheels to be perfectly aligned. That is why every morning, some of the coaches that I admire, so for example, Nancy Duarte, advise us to take a moment and plan for the day, plan for the week, plan for the months, and so on and so forth, but also turn around 360 degrees so that you can rally behind those parents who have kids at home and maybe need a good break during the weekend, but can't do it unless they sit their kids in front of the TV. How about learning a new skill? How about liaising them with a YouTube channel which will provide some entertainment for the entire family, or from resting time? So be sincere to yourself as well as the others, and let them ask questions. Let them tell you the stories and tell yourself those stories in your own way so that you have a nudge that, connects the dots for everybody. Zoom and maybe have a cocktail evening just because you feel like it. That is the trust vision you can communicate. We too often fall back into the same problems. We too often frame the world as if it was an ideal paradise. And we think, oh, I am happy. Actually, no, wait a second, I'm not that happy. And there starts the problem. Boccaccio was a very wise, even though a little bit naughty writer, said it's quite funny how inherently human want to show pity to those who are afflicted. Again, a little bit of a paradox, because once you started looking closer, their behavior may not have been totally crystal clear, nor that kind as it should have been. But this is just a little, pondering for me. Once you want to compete and boost your company's internal innovation abilities, this is what you have to do. You have to think always that no matter who you are, most of the smartest people will work for someone else. Now, innovating with external partner doesn't always give companies a competitive advantage, but it could be a good start. It has obviously, and this is the piece of advice that we would like to give, this is always a point that needs to be balanced with the internal efforts. Without them, you won't have the kind of flexibility and deeply rooted knowledge that will serve you best in the long term. So it's nowhere more evident than brick and mortar companies' innovation processes are very helpful, that customers appreciate them, but it's beginning to dawn on many businesses as well that the consumer-facing or industrial digital transformation that is required stands at a much deeper level. It has to be internalized and it has to be efficient because it becomes yours. It fits in all corners, in all sides, with the kind of culture you want to promote. Many respondents of one research said they didn't possess the capability to develop digital application internally, so they obviously outsourced. But at the end of the day, this is not what is going to make the differentiation work. I know McDonald's, which seems to be still genuine drive-through and fast food restaurant, has done a lot of work, especially since 2019. So they acquired a startup called Dynamic Yield, whose personalization systems and decision logic technologies allowed the company to personalize the outdoor drive-through menu displays. And they helped with the weather, the current traffic, the trendy menu items, and so on. All that very fast. Also then, later in September 2019, they acquired another startup called Apprente, developing voice-based technology. And that one can handle multilingual, multi-accent, and multi-item ordering, etc. So the more diverse once again, the more open-minded, but also the more deeply rooted internally those innovative technologies are, the better value they will be able to deliver in a fast and timely manner. So anyway, a big foot in Silicon Valley. As for McDonald's right now, they have what they call the Global Technology Team. And as I said, they are in California. So innovators inside an organization, particularly in the business units, will tend to develop products and processes that are the easiest for the organization then to adopt. They did it my way, and now they're free. So internal is better. Why is it better? Because when Google's Waymo developed autonomous driving technology and then struck partnerships with Fiat Chrysler Automobiles, Jaguar Land Rover, and Renault Nissan, yes, of course, that gave the three global automakers the benefit to offering consumer self-driving cars. But it did not give a significantly differentiated competitive advantage. Okay. Put another way, only 13% of your in-house innovation yielded no advantage, and an advantage that rivals quickly matched. But that happened 40% of the times when companies depended on external innovation sources. So do it internally. It also allows for experiments to be done in real life situation, and you own them without anybody else having to take a peek. And therefore, because internal innovators are familiar with the company's operations, their breakthroughs are going to be often easier to develop, reproduce, and sell externally, but also will be completely alien and different than those outsourced externally. So crises will reveal the best and the worst, and they will make you shine and sharpen your pencils. Cambridge Core says this is why. They are an opportunity to learn, but also to improve. Therefore, don't take COVID as such an exceptional situation and don't cry, right, on your pity. Combination of remote work and need for rapid adaptation can create the pathological way for working that impedes the ability for an organization to change. Just when it won't be needing it the most, then do leverage and do build, because you have those distinctive capabilities and the markets are craving for your deliveries. There are 5 ways to support basically remote work. And this is Donald Soul, senior lecturer at MIT, but also Charles Soul, co-founder of CultureX, and Josh Bersin, global industry analyst, covering a lot of areas such as human capital, talent, founder of the Josh Bersin Academy. And they say, again, what we already know, starting from the right-hand side, provider subsidized technology, without which it's going to be very hard to maintain the numbers and the sizes. But also through them, through those channels, help provide emotional support. Then build on flexibility in schedule and check on employees frequently to communicate everything you have to say. The more, the better. The more, the better, right? Even if there must be a limit at some point. So the respondent represented a cross-section of organization. Again, it's very important to look across boundaries, especially if you're talking about supply chain, especially if you're talking about moments of difficulties. I'm not going to go through the entire thing, but virtual social activities such as lunch and learns, coffee breaks, online exercises, classes, happy hours are very much mentioned as ways companies can help employees overcome social isolation. Because social abuse exists in terms of personal households, and I think this has been addressed in many cases, again, by giants like IBM. Not going to do too much talk on that, since our clue should be here the word Rendanhei. I'm sure you're familiar with it. This is probably not the first time you read about it. But this was an extract from Stuart Craner, who is the co-founder of Thinkers 50, and you can find a lot on internet. I found that this source is relevant when you want to know what is trending. And in terms of literature, well, why not look at a mix between the Blue Ocean strategy approach for your strategy, as well as innovativeness within an organization such as level 5 management, because it is truly non-arrogant. It's the kind of leader who doesn't necessarily talk about himself during C-suites, and is very well read, has not only maybe devoured Drucker in his spare time, but is going through a lot of the new applications like Blinkist perhaps, to keep yourselves updated and to keep yourself jogging around, mentally speaking, and looking at what other large organizations can tell you to do in order to achieve excellence and success. So anyway, this is a very long way of saying simply that I admire Hire. I'm sure you know of it. It's been a brilliant turnaround, but also because we have a brilliant founder and CEO at the head of this company called Zhang Ruimin. And he's been able to really dwell on some of the fundamentals of the effective executive, Drucker's must read. So the outsiders, well, you can think of Hire as a hugely complex organization, but in fact it's like a little bit of a spider's web, where every spider will have its own web, and where everyone will have their turf to be handling situation properly. Change leads to more change, and this is the very first and perhaps unique premise of this gentleman, to make the company constantly, for a better word, move on and move into the future, or be ahead of competitors, and therefore stay attuned to the zeitgeist, to the spirit of their customers and key stakeholders around the globe. So, as I said, leaders are characterized by humility, and another characteristic is that there is a zero distance to the customer in one of many Hire's mantra. It is one which Peter Drucker also would have approved of, very much so. Then let's talk a little bit about your products and the image and the kind of maybe packaging you want to give it all, because you want to walk in your customer's shoes. We would like to think we have advanced in the modern day, but while you may be pals with Alexa, Siri, and an assortment of chatbots, will markets be equally accepting of the AI driving the cars? Here are some lessons you can take from the past to guide your new research and development to customer adoption. In fact, back in the era of the New Englander Frederick Tudor, and this is a story about breaking the ice, nobody believed ice cubes would be very, necessary. Oh, I forgot to say that at Hire, they think that every giant iceberg is melting, of course, and you're constantly melting. So you're providing more water as well as you're reconstituting your iceberg, because the very notion of iceberg is always going to be around. It's a guiding notion. It's the essence. Anyway, this is the story, as I said, of Frederick Tudor, who was a New Englander in the late 1700s, and he spent decades trying to sell the ice he harvested from frozen ponds, but he was very, very unlucky because everybody laughed at his product. Then, even in 1806, after an expedition, he brought 130 tons of ice to the tropical island of Martinique, thinking that weather might help him. It amused the locals, in fact, but completely failed to find a use, and then the ice melted, and that forced Tudor to sell it as ice cream and lose quite a substantial bit of money. How did it finally break? through the concept. Well, like in any other examples of success in business, he made this product relevant to the potential buyers with a two-pronged approach. First, he realized there were distinct consumer groups that had used the eyes for other things, but would be happy, to use these ice cubes in different capacities. And then by heavily promoting the novelty of cold drinks in major cities around the world and the usefulness of cooling ice, for example, to physicians, he soon started selling to markets from Louisiana and India, therefore acquiring the nickname of Ice King along the way. So when you think, you're just rowing on your own, you may find yourself getting some good responses. So don't build bridges when you can't swim. It's much better to do it in a simple way. But nowadays, and due to the post or the COVID crisis, you're probably feeling very impulsive, right? Well, you're not alone. I know you're not alone, and you can fight against consumer perception by tackling challenges head on, which is quite costly. So you know that airline companies very rarely advertise by saying, hey, here, look, there is an airline, crash, and it will not happen to us. And you put your logo or your name under that. No. But you can learn existing pathways in consumer thought. You can guide your marketing to use these subtle cues to create the message you want. So that's exactly what we want to do in those times. Instead of hammering it against their will, we want to help them come closely to us and help them, even if they are on their island, to be rejoined with the larger boats. And it's important to focus on the finer details that will subtly but potently shape your consumer perception of the product. The wizard behind the curtain should therefore be very, very close right now to the consumers themselves. It's the only way, I believe, to make the penguins dance. The performance buttons in the financial world are being completely rewired. China, although bleeded right now, has apparently sufficient banking resources to continue doing its investments, and I think the rest of the world will continue receiving subsidies. Here and there, a lot of injustices. But don't forget that to play in the Olympics, I think you need to prepare for gold, silver, and bronze. And you should aim at those. It's very important to keep track at least of the three main competencies for your teams, for your athletes to be in good shape. For that, invest in your talent, invest obviously in your big data, whether you receive advertisements from SAS Visual Analytics, which help, for example, in this case, the rowing team in Britain. They can see what they're doing, how they're performing every day, how many calories they're ingesting, and which ones are better than not. So if you don't measure, we will certainly be drowned by the uncertainty. And this is exactly what you want to avoid to strike the right goal. Finally, I know you may be familiar with Neville. I know you may be familiar with some of the surveys around, but take your time to really investigate why you are doing so well. Is your team also reaching its full potential? That's the other question you always keep in the back of your mind, because reaching the full potential means over and over again asking the right question and asking more questions. Take the assessment to discover where you are in an honest way. It will make you feel good no matter what, because an assessment is always something very positive you discover you hadn't heard of before. I would like to stop again and praise you once more, because answering the questions is not easy to myself, even when I get to speak with Mr. Ali, and he asks me, you know, what do you think? What is your take on that? Well, it's never a short answer, but it's so much better than just keeping it to yourself and silent all the time. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for having taken the time to join. Thank you for being part of this change, being part of this leadership, being part of this responsible capitalistic approach. These are themes throughout. You can find them repeated and definitely enhanced by Rosameth Boscanther's latest book. You can find them in there. You think outside the building, that is the title she wants to convey to you. You want to continue with your distinctive and compelling take on what it takes to manage. Harvard, MIT, Stanford, IE Business School, SB Jain, GPMA, and all the numerous others who are around, your own companies, which right now are silent and are most welcome to connect over Facebook. Please let me know about your services, your transportation, your economic endeavors, your innovative policies. I'll be very, very happy to hear from you. I have no other words than thank you very much for having been here today. And I shall leave the floor right now since I think you have my best wishes.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Anna, for a very interesting presentation. And folks, we are now open for question and answer. So if you have any questions, you can either insert in the Q&A box, question box, which is available on your console, or equally you could raise your hand. There's a hand icon available on the console, so please raise your hand if you have any questions. So let me go straight to the attendees, and we have Brother Hisham who has raised a hand. Brother Hisham, could you please unmute yourself, introduce yourself, and ask a quick question, please? Yes, Brother Hisham.
Hi, can you hear me well?
Yes, we can hear you, brother.
Right, okay. My name is Hisham Al-Sabahi. I am from the UK and I work in the higher education industry. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank Iana very much for a very inspiring presentation. And I quite like presentations that do enable us to ask the right questions rather than simply give us straight answers. My question is to do with the nature of different industries. As I'm sure you know, most of the affected industries are service industries. Some of them have had to take a hit that is not going to be made up for at any time, like the tourism industry, the hospitality industry. But some other industries have had to change how they work and to work more remotely, like the education industry, for example. These are industries that have to continue, and they do continue now, but using different methods. However, these industries pretty much rely on quality assurance and making sure that there is excellence in everything they do. My question is to Iana, if you have any ideas how to continue to lead on monitoring quality in service industries that typically require high involvement, high contact time, and is now changing dramatically to a different pattern to working remotely. And there is a big question mark for people and organizations in this industry, how they can cope, how they can continue to monitor quality when there is no way to check what's happening between, for example, the learners and their teachers, or what kind of support is being provided, or no observation of teaching and learning is possible. I'm just using this as an example of how it is now very difficult to monitor quality at the time of crisis. That's my question. Thank you.
Well, what a pleasure to meet you, Ishar. Thank you so much for introducing yourself and for your wonderful, lovely question. I must have sounded very, very serious to you over the presentation. I kind of a much more, jolly and joyful person otherwise. I want to say I have two small kids of 6. They are twins, and we are attending a British system college, actually a wonderful one.
All right.
Called Runnymede. So they and myself have very quickly and easily adapted to Zoom's classes. And we had initially some Zoom class. Well, initially we didn't have any Zoom classes. We just had material sent over to us over box. And we downloaded the material and we worked at our own pace. That lasted about 10 days. Then suddenly on the chat, some mothers, some parents, I would say, started saying, oh no, we are working or we have other things to do, so we need to go and cook and go out of the house or do this and that, and it can't go on like this. So then they introduced some Zoom classes, maybe half an hour a day. And then the second week we had like half an hour in the morning, half an hour in the afternoon, etc., etc. And little by little it kind of evolved. So if I look back, we've been in lockdown since March 15, right? And schools had to be reopened on April 13, which happened to be the birthday of my kids, and they didn't. Since April, it's just 2 months and a half, 3 months today? So 3 months today. And we have changed so much. I mean, the children are so happy to be at home because, yes, of course, they have constraints. They have classes now at 9 o'clock and then at 10:15, and then they have a little snack, and then they go out and play, and it's becoming sunny. And life has changed for everyone. I never kind of felt totally drained. I felt maybe drained 15% of the time. But I think excellence may be more of a question of attitude. As you say, it's, hospitable and unspeakable kind of invitations or spaces that they can create for you. I agree with you that the schools have also had to take a bit of of a loss, not loss, but they had to take a cut in their fees. Depends whether it's 5, 10, 15%. I don't know what that represents to them depending on their future projects. Some of them had, envisioned to buy new land, new properties, expand. Some of them maybe wanted to invest more in their IT support backbones. But all that together, I think, made our life be transformed in a very enjoyable manner. So I'm kind of happy. Aisha, I don't know if you have other things in mind, so maybe I'm totally off track.
No, thank you for these thoughts. I think you and I and everyone are still a bit at loss as to how the service provider themselves can continue to monitor the quality of their provision rather than how happy the recipient is with the quality, especially in education, for example, because as you nailed it, it does pretty much depend on attitude. And since you have 2 children, you will know that your 2 children are different. I'm sure they are. And so are all children. So not all children will be, or not all students will be as receptive and as proactive and as self-motivated to engage with their education as each other. So it is a dilemma how to monitor the provision regardless of the traits or the characteristics of the recipient.
Yeah,
I don't expect a full answer.
I totally follow you. No, I totally agree. And there are going to be cases where maybe students will have to, go through a different year or go through special support, or will have to report in terms of exams in a different way. And I'm sure Malcolm Gladwell is going to soon be writing in maybe 3 to 5 year time and going to say, the generation from 0 to 18 or 0 to 15 that went through the 2020 COVID crisis, created a kind of lag in their emotional perceptions, or has this kind of distortion in their realities, or is lacking completely skills of handwriting because they've been on computers for too long, etc., etc. I'm sure this is going to be like a black mark on that generation and on us, because at the end of the day, I think this involved the entire globe. Can you believe it? I mean, it's never been that a virus traveled so happily and freely across borders without caring of humidity, temperature, acids or vitamins you were taking, or care system you had in place, and so on and so forth. It really was the first time ever we've seen such a thing, as recorded, at least in humankind.
Thank you, Brother Hisham, for a very interesting question, and thank you, Professor Aina. And if I just may add up, since you have given the example of the school system, and the question was very pertinent to the overall quality and monitoring and evaluation of the service providers. So I just give an example that even in my case of education, we as Brother Hisham, we as end users of any service, it is important that we consolidate our constructive inputs and feedbacks and continuously reach out to the service provider, ensuring that all the feedback is given to them in a very transparent manner, so they get equally a chance to further improve themselves. So thank you very much, Brother Hisham. That was an excellent question. And let me move to another question that we have in the question box from Brother Wissam Shamru. The question is, my question is about ethics in and for the workplace. How are the professional ethics changed after the pandemic? How will these ethics respond to other waves of similar changes that may take place in the future?
Mr. Ali, is it just to me, or shall I answer first and then open, or how does that?
No, this is to you. All the questions are to you, Professor Aina.
Ethics, sure. I have a take on that. I think there is a lot to be done still in terms of ethics. I like the kind of journalism, for example, produced by Frontline. This is an initiative that brings a lot of undercover kind of, research from journalism. And this Frontline, for example, publicates what's happening in Filipinas with Duterte right now, and some of the journalists being accused of whatever. So I'm not going to continue explaining, because I think each and every one has a duty to. But in terms of ethics, the more we continue having, different sources to triangulate our understanding of the world, different sources and more freedom of speech, I think that will both necessarily increase the amount of information we have to absorb, which is necessarily going to be very draining, or it's going to be concentrated and consolidated, and we'll see probably some collapse of the institution. And we will be probably like in George Orwell's 1984 conundrum, whereby we'll get only whatever they want to feed us, okay? Where the they has to be decided. So ethically speaking, I have a little bit of curiosity to see how it's going to be evolving. We have a panopticon of surveillance. We've had applications forcing you to say whether you've been out or whether you've contacted this and that. So I think this is very, very tricky, and it will continue to be. We'll still feel kind of bruised by the fact we cannot touch. To just give you an example, I mean, we as children of 6 have to go out with our little masks in front of our mouth. So it takes a bit of courage. Ethics is just that. It takes the courage to, I think, investigate what your assumptions are. Are you assuming, or are you sure? Are you willing to put yourself into question, or are you going to just go and shoot your ideas out there? Sorry.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor. Let me jump to another question from Brother Abdul Majid Al Mutaari. The question is, do you, Professor, recommend us to implement ISO 56002 Innovation Management System to respond to current situation?
Sorry, because of a little break in the Zoom, I think I couldn't understand to implement which.
Yeah. This is in the Q&A box. The question: do you recommend us to implement ISO, the international standards, or ISO 56002 Innovation Management System to respond to current situation?
I'm not familiar. I'm not aware what that involves. I'm sorry. Could you elaborate?
Okay, Brother Abdul Majid, if you can elaborate the question, or maybe you raise a hand to ask it in person. But let me move and jump to another supplementary question from Brother Shamrukh. What specific competencies need to be addressed by both employer and employees themselves to respond to the change we are living in the distance work? Competencies required by employer and employees in the distance work, Professor.
Competencies in the distant work, I think first of all is concentration, attention, and productivity in front of the screen.
Brilliant. That's from the employees. Any competencies from the employer's perspective?
Well, I think the same ones, because actually we're both humans, but I think an extra responsibility is to make sure that the communication has come through, and that whatever you agree upon is then being followed up. I don't think the methods of work have changed that dramatically. I think the circumstances pressuring on us have changed dramatically, and that capacity to discern between what is a priority and what isn't is what has changed or shifted slightly, if at all. Because it's like a Lego construction. If you construct it so far and that was stable, all right, and now you have a major block at your basis that is falling off, then maybe you need to rethink. But if you're still building and your three legs construction or three-leg construction can still hold, then you can continue maybe constructing on one side just to re-equilibrate. So it really depends at what stage you are in the entire process, and this is where I think communication is ever so important.
Brilliant, I like it. Thank you very much. Very precise, good answer. So one last question before we conclude. Professor, what if it happens again, and in what ways to prepare ourselves for it?
Well, it's not a what if, I think it will happen again. So there is
second wave already being talked in certain countries now.
I think so. At least COVID has started again. Maybe minor shapes and forms. Fine, fantastic. The lesser, that doesn't take away all the other mess around, because in between, I think there has been mess being done and mess that has to be now corrected. So it looks like we are over, but I think we might be completely misled, and the work has to be done triple. Therefore, what to do? Well, what to do? I think continue doing what you've done right so far. And I'm sure you know what right is, because it's a question of your values, being attentive, being careful, being thoughtful, being reading, being eating properly, being a loving, caring person, and being dedicating your time so that the system continues to work. I don't see any dramatic impediment in me not flying any longer. I'm not going to fly for a while, I think, or I fly much less than I did before. But I see an impediment to the hotel that was expecting me to go, end of June. So they will have something to rethink, and they will have to do something to either convince me I can go there without fearing anything, or that they will offer me something extra I can do. And if not, then I still have to make up my mind. I think the care doesn't end.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think very well answered. And I'll just add up on what you said. Eat well, build your immunity, and And that's the major thing that you need to do and be prepared for.
Absolutely, survival.
As we say that experience is the best school, yet the fool learns in no other. So we all are experiencing what we are going through right now. And we are praying that everybody shall remain safe and protected. Amen.
Inshallah.
So on that note, I would like to end and conclude. So any quick concluding remarks that you would like to give, Professor, before we dismiss out?
Some of the remarks are, we have a treasure trove to really be grateful for. And I think we have a very established, consolidated activity and attitude, because we've come so far. Whether we are 20 or whether we are 80, we are in a world which is at the same time terribly problematic, with lots of dilemmas, with lots of paradoxes, but also fabulously innovative and creative. And that cannot be stopped by anything, not even a virus, COVID-19, not even by a pandemic. On the contrary, I think we'll come out very much reinforced and much better prepared to, first of all, thank ourselves, second, look after our generations, and thirdly, give back to this universe. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Very well summarized. So thank you very much, Professor Aina. I really want to thank you on behalf of GPMA Global Performance Management Academy for taking the time to deliver this live presentation, which indeed turned out to be quite an interactive session for all of us. So once again, thank you very much.
No problem.
Look after yourself and be safe. Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you all of those who attended this webinar. Please be informed that we are recording. Stay tuned. You will receive an email with the recorded link in coming days. Stay tuned to our website. It's going to be launched very soon with an English version. Arabic version is already there. We will be announcing our upcoming webinars on it. So please stay tuned to gpaacademy.com. With that note, I would like to end and conclude. So you all have a good day, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you have signed in from. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much.
Congratulations. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much, Professor. Take care. You all have a good day. Bye-bye.